All right, everyone. Well, welcome to the Paranormal panel. Kicking off the panels at CT HorrorFest. Today I have with me, we're talking about all things paranormal, ghosts and hauntings and such. I have to my left, John Zaffis. Oh, hold on, let me fixing the toe. Okay, I have John Zaffis next to me, longtime investigator and star of Haunted Collector. So we're happy to have him here with us. Going down the line, we also have Jason McLeod, author of Dark Siege 1 and 2, noted investigator. And then on the end, we have Reverend Larry Elward and Debbie Elward, investigators, and worked with John for a number of years and continue to work with him. So we're happy to have all of them here today. All right, so you might be shouting, we'll see. Just want to start off in very general. What were the first things that got you into, or that sort of pushed you into investigating the paranormal, and possibly a first experience with the paranormal? And we'll hear from all of our guests up here. So I'm going to start with John.
What got me into the paranormal wasn't so much that I, had family in the paranormal, but when I was 15 and 16, I had a sighting at the foot of my bed. It was very transparent. It was shaking its head back and forth, and went downstairs, told my mom about it, and she said, did it say or do anything? I said, it just shook its head back and forth. She goes, well, that was my father. And I said, well, Ma, how do you know that? She said he was a very stern man and didn't really say too much. And then when I told Ed Warren about it, he goes, you never believed in any of this? I said, no, I thought you were doing it to make a quick buck. So, but that's what got me involved with it, and that's what started 44 years ago with getting me involved with the paranormal.
I've always believed in spirit. I've always believed that we are infinite awareness, having a human experience, not the other way around. And I actually picked up The Demonologist when I was a senior in high school in Westport, Connecticut, and read it from cover to cover, and I was intrigued and very alarmed and concerned for the families involved. And I didn't have any interest at that time getting involved personally. I just wasn't ready until later in the summer. I was with my friend Lou, who was a combat medic and a paramedic, and we were discussing, we were listening to the radio about a case the Warrens were investigating, and in fact it was the 3 Men and a Baby investigation about the ghost that was seen in the editing phase. And I turned to Lou and I said, that'd be so cool to work with them. And he said, yeah, no kidding. And literally the next day, Ed Warren called Lou out of the blue because he was looking for a paramedic for the team. And I said, you have to get me in there, it's time. And I got to go. Lorraine knows about synchronicities, so she let me. She told Lou to take me invite me the next weekend or the next Monday for their class, and I went, and the rest was history. And ironically, Lou and I were sent on our first case the very next evening, representing the Warrens, and I was floored because we had no experience whatsoever, but we had an experience that just totally hooked me and scared Lou half out of his mind. And that was basically a bright blue flash of light, like lightning went off into the room, and 4 of us witnessed it, and there was not a thing on the video cassette. And it was explained basically that this woman, who was a spirit in the house, was giving us evidence that she was there, but there was going to be no evidence on the videotape until we heard the heartbeat. 3 very distinct heartbeats that scared Lou out of his mind because we all would have missed it, and Lou heard them. And there was a specific message for Lou, but that totally hooked me and made me continue, and it kind of made Lou to turn around pretty quickly.
Well, I was born with the gift to discern, so I could see spirits from a very early age, but I really didn't know what to do with it. So I had read many Warren books, but they scared me. I didn't want to go into a haunted house. I enjoyed reading them, but there was no way I was ever going to go into a haunted house. And one night my sister said, let's go to one of their lectures. I went to the Warrens lecture, and I was intrigued by what they were presenting. And they had a sign up for a class, and I started going to their classes. Still, I was not going to a haunted house until one night, on the eve of my 40th birthday, Ed Warren got us all together and took us to a house. I was scared to death. Even though I could see spirits as a child, they were just family members, so they didn't bother me. Well, I stood outside, and Ed grabbed everybody's hands and said the Lord's Prayer and told us to be careful and have protection and everything. And he put my sister and I in the greenhouse, and we sat there, and they started the prayers throughout the house. And this white formed figure walked right through the greenhouse. And well, I thought it was cool. I wasn't scared, and I was hooked.
Hey everyone. My first interest in the paranormal started when I saw the movie The Exorcist in 1973 or 74. After I'd seen that, I said, boy, this is what I want to do for a career when I grow up. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but this is something I'd like. Don't know why, but just one of those things. I went to a Catholic high school at the time, so had all these priests around. I would ask them about exorcisms. They knew nothing from nothing, and they didn't even want to know anything less or more. So then a few years later, I got involved with the team of Ed and Lorraine Warren. We went to a few classes and stuff. And one day I was able to witness my first actual paranormal event. It was an exorcism of a farmer in Massachusetts. A book was written about it. It was called Satan's Harvest. I believe it was written by Gerald Brittle or something like that. And the exorcism was done by a priest friend of mine. His name was the late Robert McKenna. As far as I know, it was done successfully. And one of the highlights of the experience was seeing a real exorcism, and I met John Zaffis for the first time.
All right. Well, we've got a lot of background on first investigations. John, how was your first experiences when you first went out to investigate your first case?
Yeah, the one thing I want to bring up, and this is totally amazing, and most of you don't even realize it. I think this is the first time in I don't know how many years you are ever seeing several people that worked with Ed and Lorraine Warren speak publicly together. It just doesn't ever usually happen. The very first investigation that I ever did was here in Connecticut. It was called the Old Phelps Mansion in Stratford, Connecticut. Notoriously known haunting in the late 1800s. I remember going in, we were in there for several different hours. We were hearing all kinds of noises and everything else. Did we get scared? Yeah. I screamed and yelled out of there like I was a little girl running out of it, wouldn't go back in it again. So those types of things always stay with you when you have your very first experiences, or when you have something that is genuine. And that was about, I'd say, 43, 44 years ago when I went into that house. It was around the same time framing. So.
Is this our first experience?
Yes.
Okay. When I was working with Lorraine, told me, she said, the more you're involved in cases of this nature, the more your sensitivities will increase, and we'll find out what those sensitivities will be. And we all have the ability to be psychic, and I experienced the overwhelming grief or the emotion that this discarnate female spirit felt, to the point where my jaw dropped and tears just streamed down my eyes. And I'm on audio cassettes going, Lorraine, the sadness. And this was actually as we were participating in spirit communication, and the table was bouncing up and down off the floor like a basketball, and it was a huge table. And 6 of us involved, including the Warrens. And that changed my life forever. More so than it would have been to see a ghost, I really wanted to see. Instead, I picked up the grief that this woman felt. In this case, she had lost her life as her body was, as she was being rushed to the house to give birth. The baby also lost its life. And can you imagine a woman's grief being rushed to give birth, and then her consciousness, once vacating the body, going to that house, going, where's my baby, and the baby nowhere to be found. And that changed my life because it made me feel for these people and the plight that they're experiencing, and much more so than ever seeing a ghost or hearing a ghost. So that really is my first powerful experience.
My first powerful experience was, in fact, my first investigation with the Warrens. The father had killed his whole family. He had waited the whole day to systematically kill each and every one of them. Then he killed himself, and left all the bodies in the house. About 2 weeks went by, and the neighbors began to smell something in the house. And the police broke down the door, and they found the bodies. A few years later, a family moved in with children. And this seemed to activate the spirits that were in the house. And the Warrens were called in, and an exorcism was done while I was there. I wanted no part of exorcism, so I shied away from that. I stayed in the greenhouse to see the spirits coming in, and it was successful, and the house was the spirits were gotten rid of in the house, and the family went on to live there peacefully, and I understand they're still living there now.
Okay, my first paranormal experience, I'm going to have to go back to that possessed farmer that was involved with the Warren case in Bishop McKenna. During the course of the exorcism, I just want to say at the onset, I'm kind of like a devout skeptic. You know, I believe in this stuff, but I really like to see it myself. Well, I saw it myself, and it's not just like the movies, but it's pretty darn close. During this exorcism, during the middle of the prayers, the possessed person kind of went through what they call a metamorphosis. That's kind of an extreme term, but this is the part of an exorcism when, in an extreme case, your face can actually change into something really hideous, like a mask-like, demon-like form. And during the prayers, this poor guy actually went through that. It was caught on videotape, and even though the videotape was of poor quality, I think you could still see it on YouTube. Let me tell you, I was standing there about 5 feet away from him. I actually saw what was on the tape, and I guess that kind of caught me. I said, my God, you know, this is interesting. This is really real. You know, you can't fake this stuff.
You know, you mentioned about how all of you have worked with the Warrens for a number of times, who are, of course, now world famous and the preeminent, you know, sort of original sort of ghost hunters that came to prominence in a lot of big cases. What are your memories of working with the late Ed Warren as well as Lorraine, or what you can say about whether it's a funny experience or a terrifying experience, or are there any that stand out, or just in general about working with them?
I can monopolize you the rest of the day for this one. With me, it's probably a lot different because Ed and Lorraine were my aunt and uncle, so I knew them differently. You know, I knew them as family, and then I knew them as working with them. So what a lot of people don't realize with Ed Warren, because he portrays himself so seriously, he was the biggest cut-up person you'd ever meet in your life. He'd play tricks on you. I went into their museum one time with a couple of researchers. All the lights were off and everything, and he was a practical joker. He opened up the back door, he walked in with a big bullhorn, and he started yelling in it. I jumped up, I was knocking things over in their museum. He was standing there laughing, I was mother effing him up and down. So, you know, the comedy in most of the situations I look at, and I keep a lot of that a lot closer with me. And the other part of it is I probably look at more of my one-on-one time with Ed Warren than I do anything else, because that was when you got to see a different person altogether from the person you see, you know, in the movies, or you would see him speaking. It was two different people. Most people don't even realize that. Well, it's the same thing with me. People watch Haunted Collector, then they meet me and they go, "You're nothing like Haunted Collector," and I go, "I hope not," because again, it was very stiff. It was very, you know, the way you had to do things for TV, and my personality is nothing like that at all. So,
That's very interesting. What a blessing to be able to be experiencing that all your life. I always remember Ed joking around all the time. In fact, it was this case, the same case I was referring to, where I felt the emotion, where we were all situated around this giant farm table that was starting to bounce up and down. And during the spirit communication, he said, "If there are any spirits here, enter Jason." And I said, "That's not funny," you know. And I didn't give him permission. But he was always playing jokes, and but there's a reason. And he always said, laughter is very important. Raising your vibration, raising the vibration. Fear is the lowest vibration. Laughter raises the vibration. And Lorraine, every memory I ever have working with her is just as sweet as pie. You know, always calling you honey and my love and my dear, and she always laughed with Ed too. So it was just a great experience for me, and I feel so blessed to have been able to be a part of that.
Well, when I joined Ed and Lorraine, I brought my sister with me, and we became very good friends. We were always over to Ed and Lorraine's house, and we actually worked on their journal. And we were allowed to go into the museum and look at the various items. And one day, Ed brought us down there because he wanted us to write on the Borley coin. And it was a coin that he had received when he was in Borley Rectory over in England. And it was an American quarter, and he kept it in a secure place in his museum. He told me to hold it out of my hand. I'll hold out my hand. I did. He put the coin in my hand. Then proceeded to look at me and said, "What are you doing? You're holding that coin." Unbeknownst to me, my daughter was home, and she was sitting in our living room, and she heard a noise, and she looked up, and she actually got hit in the head with a quarter that came out of the ceiling. And when I came home, she said to me, "What did you do? What did you touch over that house?" And I said, "Just a quarter." She goes, "Look at the mark." And she did. She had a round mark on her head from the quarter that was hit from our ceiling.
I remember about 30 years ago, I was driving down Main Street with my mother, and all of a sudden this guy on a motorcycle, I think it was a chopper or something, speeds by us, you know, going 100 miles an hour. And my mother says to me, "Who the hell is that damn fool?" And I said, "Mom, that's the greatest ghost hunter in the world."
You mentioned there about sort of the investigation sometimes following you home. Or some of the, do you have any significant experiences where you were investigating something, obviously outside of your own experience, that ended up affecting you in terms of your home life, or just something that's starting to sort of follow you back or come home?
I think a lot of times I get the biggest kick out of when I hear people say to me, "I want to go ghost hunting, I want to go to haunted locations, I want to do all this, but I don't want nothing to follow me home." And I'll go, "Well, don't we all?" Doesn't go that way. You get involved with something, you're going to have an experience sooner or later. And to me, that's one of the biggest lessons learned when starting out in this, and you experience things. Because it's one thing to hear a story, it's another thing to experience it. Once you do, it changes your reality. It's no longer a story, it's part of you. So again, I think probably the horrific, mind-opening thing to me that really almost knocked me out of the work was, how many of you have ever seen The Haunting in Connecticut on the Discovery Channel? The movie, let's not even go there. But anyhow, with that, having that experience, witnessing that, really altered me and made me realize that there's just so many things out there that we don't understand. But like I said, once you have those experiences, it changes you. And it makes you realize that there's a whole world that so many of us just don't understand. 44 years later, I'm still involved with this work and still doing these things. Why? Searching for that big answer. What's it all about? We know we're made of energy. What exactly happens? Is there a heaven? Is there a hell? Is there all these crazy places? Again, we have a lot of theories. We have a lot of things that we look at, but we still look for that magical thing where we want this proven out scientifically. Do we work in a scientific field? Absolutely not. Why? We can't get Casper the Ghost to repeat the same things over and over. And you need that to be able to chart, to be able to say that we have scientific proof. And we still don't have it to this day. But I'm hoping before I turn into a ghost, we do.
I've always felt protected. I've never been really afraid, but it was, again, the same case that I was referring to twice before, is because I made a connection with that woman who was so distraught to the point where my jaw dropped and tears just streamed out of my eyes 6 times, including on the drive home, just overcome, turning on the lights, showing everybody my tears. And I felt I was affected by that for sure. But when I was home on Sunday, writing for my column called Hauntings for the Sacred Art University Spectrum newspaper about these cases, that I immediately picked up the phone and I told Lorraine, I thanked her for being able to to participate in that case, and when are we going back, was my question. And she said, well, we just got back. We haven't even gone over any of our footage. I said, okay, well, have a great night. And 2 minutes later, I called her right back and I said, Lorraine, I really feel strongly that we should go back to this house. When are we going back? And she said, Jason, we can't get in touch with the family. We don't have permission to return a second time. I said, okay, I'm sorry for bothering you again. Hung up the phone. 2 minutes later, I called her back. Lorraine, when are we going? She said, Jason, are you writing about this for your column? And I said, yes. She said, you're drawing her right to you. So through the law of attraction, by focusing my awareness on her, she was coming right to where I was, because there is no time or space outside of the third dimension. For her, she can be with me in an instant and be right back at the house. So I had to really put her out of my mind. And there was only one experience I had while I lived in Westport that entire time, was that just a light came on by itself while I was sleeping one evening. And it didn't really frighten me. It definitely impressed me, I guess you would say, and nothing like that's happened since.
Well, Larry and I always wanted to think that we were safe no matter what we were doing. But one day we came home from work, and we lived on a second floor, and we walked into the house and we could smell smoke. And we had a landlady whose son would make wine in the cellar, and he would also smoke while he was making the wine. So we figured it was coming up through the heat vents. So I walked in deeper into the house, and the smoke became stronger. And I said, Larry, go through the living room, and I'll go into the den. In the den was our computer, and Larry had an altar there. And I'll let him tell you what we saw.
Yeah, my altar was completely charred. On it I had a wooden icon, some relics, and a few books. It seemed like the fire went all around the icon, just singed it a little bit, just singed the relics with no damage, and the book was completely intact. Everything else was completely charred. It's on, you can see it at the Zaffis Occult Museum right now, but everything else was fine. That there were curtains right next to the altar. They weren't touched at all. Oh yeah, I had a pewter chalice. That completely melted.
The paten melted down over the chalice, and there was a hole, like a missile was shot through the chalice. Big, huge hole. The funny thing that happened, I'm on the phone with John telling him what's happening, and the doorbell rings. And it's the Bridgeport Fire Department. They want to check our smoke detectors. And so some very fast talking on his part, because his brother's a lieutenant in the fire department. He goes, oh, my brother's a lieutenant. They go, oh, we don't have to check your fire alarms. You're fine. So luckily we got out of that, because I don't know what they would have thought if they had seen the altar.
That brings up a good point about many people, and I'm sure you've all talked about these experiences before, but what are some of the telltale signs where you can tell it's not just a haunting or poltergeist activity, but it goes into that field of the demonic? What type of signs do you look for, or how do you differentiate that?
I just look at Debbie. Geez, usually everybody starts laughing. Nobody's laughing. Again, too, when you're dealing with things that are significant, you always remember possession and a house being infested with demons and devils and everything is very rare. Today, it's just blown right out of proportion, with everything being devils and demons in everybody's houses. But you look for a person, their personality is changing. They can't eat, they can't function. There's telltale signs a lot of times if they're getting severely scratched. You try to find out if they got involved with things, practicing different things. That's what I look for in the majority of the situations if it's legit. But always remember, especially today, we have to rule out mental illness, bipolar, schizophrenia. multiple personalities, because today those things are brought more into the forefront and we got a better understanding of it today than we did years ago. So nobody thinks that's funny, that just looking at Debbie's a telltale?
If I am possessed, it's from hanging around him. Now we're laughing.
Wow. Strange sounds. That's a good one. I don't know who's doing that. I think that a lot of the signs are very subtle. For instance, if somebody is perpetually angry, or if their personality is changed in a way that they feel they get easily angered, for instance, and just feeling negative emotions. You'll have animosity between family members. You'll see conflict start to arise, and that's always the MO behind these types of situations, where they try to divide and conquer. And I call it the fear buffet, because they just want to do nothing but siphon off the fear energy from you. And to me, you gotta aim it. You can't point it. To me, it's fear. Fear is the lowest vibration, and love is the highest vibration. And they don't want a situation where people are in harmonious coexistence. They want animosity. They want to go after the black sheep of the family. They want to go after somebody who's easy to affect in that regard.
Well, me being an empath, I'm able to pick up on the negativity that's coming from a person, and don't say anything. I usually don't want anything to do with them, and I'll tell him I don't want to go there. I'm not, I've already picked up that the person has some kind of spiritual problem, and in plain English, I don't like them. But until we pray over them and everything, I still go through with the prayers and everything, and I find myself, once the entity is relieved from them, that I like them. All right, I wouldn't have fought for them.
Well, I'm neither a psychic nor an empath, but I'm pretty certain when we're having a case coming up our way, I know exactly when it's going to happen, because Deb and I start fighting like hell. Talk about cats and dogs. We fight about the damaged things. We fight about English muffins, this, that, and the other. And I'm thankful for that. That's all it is. Also, we live with our daughter, who's an empath, and sometimes she'll come down at night or in the morning, and she'll have 3 scratches on her and say, "Well, what are you and John up to now?" And sure enough, in a few days or hours, we'll get a call. A case will be coming our way.
Being here at the HorrorFest, obviously a lot of people are fans of I imagine, horror movies and ghost stories and such. What do you think Hollywood gets most wrong about investigation? Do we have enough time? And perhaps what's the most accurate sort of depiction you've seen, or what do they, if anything, do they get right?
Wow. Again, when watching the movies, always remember they're created for entertainment. Nobody's going to want to sit in a theater for an hour or 2 hours and things aren't happening or anything's not going on, because you're going to leave and tell everybody, or go on Facebook and post that it's a sucky movie. In other words, if they don't have all the hype and all the stuff that's in it, it just doesn't occur. I mean, again, with the basics on some of the things that transpire, like the haunting in Connecticut, what the family went through and everything, there was an exaggeration about the son cutting himself up. The son did not break open the walls and bodies fell out. We'd be more interested in that than we would have been in the haunting. And he did not burn down the house. Now, the Conjuring 1, the Perron family, I'm very good friends with all of them. Annie and I have been friends for, well, she yells at me because I always give ages away, for 40 plus years. But the haunting did take place. It was 5 little girls. It was a farmhouse. And a lot of those things did happen. Now, I was laughing because I was sitting at my table and there were several people in the front there talking about the Conjuring, and they kept saying, just talking about how the chair levitated, spun, and hung upside down. And the guy says, "Do you really think that could happen?" I busted out laughing. I go, "No." What happened was the chair slid across the floor with Carolyn in it. It did smash against the doors. They took it in, and there were no tunnels underneath the house. There was nothing like that. I've been in that farmhouse, I think it was about 6-7 years ago, with Jason and Grant from Ghost Hunters. We did an investigation in there, and we did an episode. So that was a cool thing after all those years to be able to go in there, and Jay and I would just start arguing. It's not haunted, it's not haunted. I said, shut up, you've never even been in there yet. So anyways, I said to him afterwards, I said, well, is it haunted or is it? Well, I don't know, I don't want to talk about it. But, you know, again, with that and looking at what Hollywood has done over the course of the years, going all the way back to Amityville and The Exorcist and everything, stop and remember, you do history and research on it, you will find that a lot of things have changed. Please don't ask me anything about the Annabelle movies. Nowhere, no way, shape, form does it have anything to do with the original investigation or the Raggedy Ann doll. So.
I've never been on a television show really, or in a movie, nor have I investigated a case that ended up being turned into a movie. But I do know that Hollywood has a certain formula. They need to have a scare every certain number of minutes. They need to have a specific formula to present to keep everybody afraid. My main interest in the movies, however, is the fear factor and the fact that what do we all go do? We go see a horror movie, and what do we feel when we're inside the horror movie? Fear, right? And what do these negative entities use to fuel themselves? Fear. So the interesting thing I like to point out to everybody, and the most primary reason that I wrote about the case that occurred that I wrote in my books called Dark Siege, is that the human body is able to perceive 0.005% of the matter, space, and the energy that's in this universe, and only a tiny fraction of that, which is visible light. We can see less than 1% of 1%. So to say that something isn't real because we can't see it is ludicrous. And just think about that for a minute. We're hunting ghosts who can see us perfectly, but we can't see them less than 1% or 0.5% of the time, because it's all we can perceive is visible light through the five senses. When you vacate the body, anybody who's having a near-death experience, for instance, they have a level of connectedness and connection that they can't even describe once they come back into the body and see this world through the lens of the physical body. So when you go and see these movies and you give these movies your undivided attention and you put yourself into the role of the victim versus as an observer where you're safe, I believe you're putting yourself in danger, and I believe you're feeding these negative entities, and that's why I'm really against a lot of these movies. But the formula is there, and unfortunately, if my books are ever turned into a movie, you know, I'd insist that nothing is altered, because the truth needs to be known. The Warrens spent their lives investigating the unknown, and we all participated in it and took part in their classes and their investigations just so we could unravel the mysteries of the universe. And to see them perverted on the big screen, I think, is a disservice to the lessons that we've all learned together, collectively and individually, and also with our mentors and friends and family members for John and their legacy.
Well, I agree with John. We had a case that we worked on, and the woman levitated in our living room. When TV picked it up for an episode of A Haunted, they really elaborated on it. They had her fling her arms to the side, the chair rose 5 feet in the air, she was surrounded by light. But what really happened was the chair and her rose a little more than an inch off our floor. We weren't aware of it at the time. We were struggling to keep her in the chair, and it seemed like she had gained a lot of strength because there were 5 of us holding her down. When we reviewed the tapes, we saw that the chair and it actually came up off the floor. So they had to, I mean, if they showed that on TV, nobody would have been watching the episode.
Okay, going back to that episode, which where she was levitating, and it was caught on our film. It was shown to about 5 different leaders of paranormal organizations and societies. Now, it's nice that the 4 of us are up here and we're agreeing on everything, but usually these guys and girls, we don't agree on anything. We have wars over orbs and stuff like that, and they all agree that, in fact, this woman did levitate. So that was really something. Going back to the original question, whatever it was, I think one of the best movies I've ever seen that depicts a real exorcism would be The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Okay, that's pretty much down to earth. The movie The Exorcist, very good movie, I must say. A lot of theatrics, a lot of Hollywood in it, but it did break ground by stating the fact that there was a problem with evil out there. And to anybody that wants to see what a real exorcism is like, it's not exciting, it's not really scary. Just go on YouTube. There you'll see an event that's very sad, often heartbreaking. Technically, it would be good for somebody that wants to become a priest or a minister and go into an exorcism or deliverance ministry, but as far as entertainment goes, no, not really.
Just right in our area, as John, you mentioned the haunting in Connecticut, Southington case, and of course we haven't mentioned the Lindley Street case, but we've had a lot of famous cases in Connecticut and of course in the Northeast. Is there a reason you think that we haven't had a case break out into a mainstream type of a coverage like a lot of those cases did? Is it just a change in time or people's perception or technology, or if any of you have opinions about that?
Hold your knife up, do another one just in case.
Why aren't we seeing any other mainstream cases? Again, too, there's a few that are out there. I mean, even though it's still in the New England area, you have the Amityville. We have the Entity. We know that took place over on the West Coast. But again, I always say the same thing to myself. It seems like anything that was major took place like here in the New England area with a lot of the creepy movies, and they base it. Why? Just because here again, it's just the way things line up and the way different things happen. And I'd like to see more cases that were really concrete and substantial in other different parts of the country come to the forefront. And actually there was another one down in Texas where they had 3 or 4 houses where they had a lot of problems, and I can't remember the name of that movie that came out. But if you notice, they try to make things more fiction today when they do the movies or they do anything, because that way they have that liberty to be able to do whatever they want. So again, I don't know. I think a lot of it just had to do with the Warrens, because the Warrens were in the New England area, and anything that turned into anything major seemed to have focus around them in the 80s and the 90s when it came into some of the movies.
I believe that many cases do come about and the people involved are devastated over it, and they don't want to face ridicule, they don't want to face their neighbors, they don't want to be the community loonies, and their lives are turned upside down and they don't want to come forward. And that's a really good reason, as far as I'm concerned. There are also other people who seem to love the limelight, that, I was attacked by demons, so I'm a celebrity and I want to go and tell my story about how I was ravaged. Well, in my mind, you aren't that tough or powerful if you've been ravaged. So it's really nothing to celebrate. And until you experience it yourself, and most of us won't, there's really no frame of reference. You cannot describe something. But the most important thing to understand is even if you believe in ghosts and you believe in demons and you've studied them and you know the general MO about what they're capable of doing and what they would like to do to you, it's one thing to then experience that and go, okay, I'm dealing with something here that I'm familiar with. But imagine being completely oblivious to the fact that these things even exist, and then to be completely mauled and to completely have your life turned around and watch your children be thrown around and scratched, and all the different types of phenomena that go on. It's enough to drive somebody completely out of their mind, and they don't want to talk about it. But the rampant increase in Ouija board use is what prompted me to write about this Dark Siege case, because there are so many people, including paranormal groups, that were using Ouija boards in people's homes while claiming to be there in an effort to help them. And I think that is just absolutely ridiculous. And I wrote my books to warn kids about the dangers of Ouija board use and also these paranormal groups using Ouija boards inside people's homes.
I think Jason hit it right on the head. Most cases that we've come across, The people that don't want to go public are the horrific cases, the cases that, if shown on TV or in the movies, would be great. The people that want to go forward, nothing really's happened. And they're asking us, oh, this is the worst case you've ever seen. I mean, a glass slid across the counter or a cabinet door open. Granted, to them, that's the worst scenario that could happen. But most of our cases, we've had a lot of people that want to go on TV, they want movies made out of their cases and everything. Nothing really happened. So, we can't make up some of the stuff that they have, because then we would lose our credibility.
I think a lot of these people that are suffering from hauntings and possessions, they really have no place to go to seek help. Most of the clergy does not believe in it, and the few that do, they send them to all these kinds of psychologists and things like that, which they have to pay for, by the way, out of their own money. And if you're not a member of that particular congregation or denomination, I don't know what on earth happens to you. Okay, then you call one of these psychic groups that you see on TV or that you find in the phone book. What on earth do they do to help the person involved? Can they refer them to clergy? Do they do banishings by themselves, or do they just go in and say, yep, indeed, you do have a ghost or haunting or something, and they just leave them, take up all their equipment, and then go back and say, we got another one, let's look for another case. So it's very difficult for somebody that's really, really tormented, because they have no place to go, and nobody that'll help them.
I think we may have time for a few questions if anyone would like to come up from right directly behind the video camera, and I could bring the microphone over to you if anyone has a question. Okay.
You guys, like, the way you speak about, like, energy and the law of attraction, like, it seems, like, founded in the idea of natural law. Is the, like, discipline, I guess, of the paranormal, like, all founded in the idea of, like, the 7 Hermetic principles and natural law, like, as a whole?
I think to understand what's going on, you have to understand that we are not physical. The quantum physics has proven that we do not live in a physical universe, and that we are awareness having a human experience. And therefore, if you're awareness and you're non-physical, you're electromagnetic in nature. So your very mindset, whether or not you're a heart-centered, compassionate individual, or somebody who's full of rage and fear and anxiety, and the whole negative mindset dictates what you draw to you through the law of attraction. So in these hauntings, I call it the fear buffet, because these negative entities want nothing more than to siphon the fear energy off of you to use as a fuel source, which weakens you in that process. So to fight against that, just like Ed Warren always talked about how laughter is great for raising your vibration, you want to do things that raise the vibration inside your house. You don't want to focus on death and horror movies and painting skulls all over your body in tattoo form, and to focus on all the negative, dark things. You want to raise your vibration by loving one another and by trying to broadcast love from your heart. The Institute for Heart Math has shown that the energy field around our heart is the largest energy field out of all of our energy fields, including all of our many auric fields. So love is the highest vibration. You can raise your vibration in your house by doing many things, like burning sage or sandalwood or frankincense or myrrh, laughter, just trying to love one another. And that, to me, is the law of attraction right there. You can dictate what you're going to experience based upon how you want to attract things in your life.
All right. Unfortunately, we're about at our cutoff here, but if you have further questions, I certainly suggest you go over to the booths and see all these individuals. And I definitely want to thank John Zaffis, Jason McLeod, and Debbie and Larry Elward for coming and sharing some information with us. So thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for coming.